Welcome to Zero. I'm Paul Martin. In this series, we're exploring the growth and increasing awareness of issues related to safety. Safety in the workplace, safety at home. The Mission Zero message was first advanced a decade ago, and it steadily gained prominence in the subsequent years. Now, whether that's through advertising, social media, work-safe programs on job sites and workplaces, in school classrooms, or this TV show, Mission Zero has been capturing increased share of mind for all of us. And while all of us are paying more attention to the topic, Saskatchewan has made only modest progress in shedding its moniker as the province with the poorest safety record of all. Perhaps one of the reasons we have been so slow to embrace the changes needed to move us from worst to first has been an underlying belief that when it comes to an injury, well, it just won't happen to me. It happens to someone else. In this episode, we meet a man who had apparently everything going for him. He was a noted hockey player, suiting up with names such as Wickenheiser and Miner and Blaisdell. But it did happen to him, not once, twice. As a result, he's become a powerful voice in support of groups such as MAD and SAD, that your actions have consequences. Meet Clayton Yurkoski, the youngest of 6 boys in a family of 8 children. He was the classic achiever. He played a host of musical instruments. He was a skilled athlete. He was the quintessential cool guy.
By the time I was 16, I was probably buying and drinking before I was even legal age. Yeah, I guess that was all part of our school activities after school, like parties, and there was always drinking, and if somebody didn't have enough fuzz on their face to go buy liquor, we'd always find an older brother or sister to pull it for us. And we weren't bad kids per se, you know. It was a normal thing, you know, Friday night, Saturday night, to get a few cases of beer or whatever and go and have a party somewhere and drink and I guess try to be somebody, you know. I guess that was part of the North American way for teenagers as you got older. You know, they fell into the fast cars and the parties and the drinking, and yes, we knew about the 0-8 thing and all that drinking and getting a 54 open liquor in the car, you know, like, that didn't really apply to us, did it? Well, it did, but, you know, we didn't stop and think a lot about it, and it's nowhere near as prominent back then as it is nowadays, where they're trying to get zero tolerance for everyone to get out, not drink and drive, period, okay? If you're going to drink, don't drive.
Well, that's solid advice today. It also benefits from hindsight. As a teenager, Yurkoski was at the wheel of a rebuilt classic vehicle on one of those beer-fueled nights. And before long, he found himself racing on South Albert Street in Regina.
Knowing full well we'd been drinking, we shouldn't have been out racing around, but we got into a race and I blew the brake lines in the car and I couldn't stop. And I rolled the car down in South End, Regina on Gordon Road, and I was lucky. I got stayed in the vehicle and just thrown around inside and broke my collarbone and took a chunk of bone out of my knee. But other than hobbling around for 6 or 8 weeks, I got better. But my friend was thrown out of the car. My door flew open and he slid between me, my back in the seat, and hit his back on a pole. And they picked him up and tried to get him to walk. He had a spinal cord injury and was not. Of course, when the ambulance came, they moved him with the backboard, but he never should have been moved at all without the backboard. So he ended up with a serious spinal cord injury and he couldn't walk again. I couldn't believe it happened. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was athletic, I was kind of cool, I was a cut above the rest. I didn't want to believe this had happened and hoped that my friend would walk again. Of course he didn't.
That was the first but not last encounter with the dangers of drinking and driving. On the second go-around, he was not quite so lucky. Errors that included him and a friend riding a motorcycle that was struck and then slid into an oncoming vehicle.
And my buddy went under their front end and he was killed. His chest was crushed. And I got thrown off the bike over in a parking lane, bounced off one car into another car. And and I don't remember much after that. I remember before the accident, not on the leaving where we were at a club. And I remember all that, but the getting on the bike and leaving, but waking up months and months later, that was about it. I was rendered into a coma. My leg had a dozen breaks in it, a couple compound fractures, 4.5 inches of bone missing out of it. I had gas gangrene. And at that time, were they looking to probably save my life more so than try to fix the leg at that time? And I did have many surgeries on the leg and got it somewhat fixed up over the next 10 years.
Having lost 10 centimeters of bone led to some experimental treatment that over time saw the bone regenerate itself. And today, a strong AA supporter, he takes every opportunity to help others by sharing his experiences. It inspired him to become an advocate for safety, someone willing to sit in front of a TV camera and explain his mistakes.
I can share my story, and hopefully that would sink into them, but there are other options to going out and getting drunk, and so drunk, we're sure you got to drive, you're usually too plastered to walk, so you got to hang on to something. But what would you say? I remember meeting a guy that was a university professor and lost everything because of alcohol. His wife, his family, that, and he said something to me, and it's always stuck in my mind for many years. He was living in a little hotel downtown Regina, which is long gone now, the Lotus, but he said, "You, Clayton, you never, ever could have, would have, should have, never done anything. Okay? It's happened, it's happened. If you can change something before, fine, but you never, ever can go back."
Yurkoski's story, though, doesn't end there. He's also experienced significant pain and remorse in his life. He's also had more than his fair share of tragic events among those close to him. And each time, alcohol was involved.
My first was my one brother, Ted. This is way back in 1972. My brother was hit and killed by a drunk driver. Actually, his car was plowed into in the back end, and he was thrown into the ditch and out of the car, but he was killed. He died on near his first anniversary of his wedding. And about a year, another brother who had been hurt at Ipsco, a chain had hit him in the back, and he was in pain, taking medication to open the chambers of his heart to increase the blood flow, trying to ease the pain in his back and body. And he was going somewhere, he didn't take his medication, and he grabbed a beer and just tuggled just the fluid to get the bill down. And the alcohol counteracted the Darvon, so it actually seized the chambers of his heart shut, so he died of medically cell suffocation. Blood flow just stopped, and he was gone. And I had friends in school. I had a friend watching football all day, him and two buddies. They decided to go skidooing in the middle of a storm. Why? Well, because they're on private land, they can do it. And one guy didn't have a headlights, he was following the other guy's tail light, and the front guy fell off his snowmobile. And the guy behind didn't see him and hit him and speared his chest, and he was killed. I mean, all preventable, but stupid, collisions. And another buddy walked up to the wrong house where the guy had been drinking and smoking and pot, and had come home, was very angry at his wife or whatever. But he swore if these guys ever came back in, he was going to shoot him dead. And this guy went up to the wrong house. The doors opened out, and out come the gun, and boom, 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 boom. He was dead. Now the guy had been drinking at a party out at the lake, and knowing he was well over his weight, thought he'd go for a swim and sober up. He never came back. They found him the next day, washed up on the other side of the shore, drowned. And it's just stupid. And again, well, what if, it can't be what if, because it's already happened, and I guess the first thing, if the person had stopped and thought and made a decision before they did it, they still might be here today, but they're not.
A supporter of abstinence, for himself at least, he doesn't like to preach to others about morals or how they should conduct themselves. He simply wants to bring a higher level of awareness to the broader community of the dangers associated with not taking preventative measures. Each of us is in charge of our own lives and actions. He simply wants to remind us that we carry that responsibility.
I can't change a person's mind or change their opinion, what they think of what I've gone through. If they think they can go ahead and drink and party and get away with it and they'll be okay, maybe they will, maybe they won't, I don't know. All I can do is just share my story when I've been asked to, and if it makes somebody make a second thought and think twice about what they may or may not do, I guess that's the goal.
The Global Transportation Hub, or GTH, has generated more than its share of headlines over the years, but one story that's garnered little attention involves one of the hub's tenants. SLGA, the Saskatchewan Liquor and Gaming Authority, built a new distribution center in the GTH. It's a warehouse that fills orders from retailers across the province. And while it has earned little notoriety in the broad community, it has indeed generated plenty of attention in one segment of the marketplace. those involved in safety programming. It turns out the Regina warehouse is something of an icon in these circles. It's attracting visitors from across the continent, people who want to see the facility for themselves. Now, when SLGA determined they needed a new warehouse, they took a different approach. They started the design with safety in mind and then developed the building structure from that point.
Probably our biggest hazard in the workplace is our work is very physically demanding. So we, in our warehouse and our liquor stores, we're moving many cases of liquor products in a year. And so obviously the number one way to eliminate that would be to eliminate the lifting as much as possible. But we also look for ways to reduce the risk as well. So we've come out with stock standards, so actual standards for keeping the product off the floor, maximum heights that they can stack the product in the warehouse. But we're going one step further now with designing it into the scheduling process. So a lot of our lifting injuries are related, they're cumulative in nature, so it's the injury kind of builds up over the course of several days or several weeks. And so through science, we can see that, if you can build rest and recovery breaks right into the schedule, we can actually prevent injuries. And so that's something we're working on right now. We're also we're starting to put more work and more effort into early intervention strategies. So this year we're going to have a physiotherapist that's going to be going out to the workplace and working with our staff, building some rapport, participating in the lifting, and actually identifying where we can tweak and make things even safer. We just built a new distribution center out at the Global Transportation Hub, and we designed safety into that building as well. We designed ergo racking into the facility so that all the product is 17 or 18 inches off the ground, so keeping it at a safer lift. So I think that is where we're going to see even more gains, is because we're designing it into the work.
Designing a building that had safety in mind was not the beginning of the process, it actually was the end. The process began not with blueprints, but 6 or 7 years earlier with a focus on culture and safety management programming.
Well, we really focused on one theme each year. So year one, we focused on awareness. We just really wanted to build a good level of awareness in the organization. With that, we designed a customized training program for all of our supervisors. And it was a 2-day course that all of our supervisors attended. Really talked about the duty of care and their responsibility as a supervisor. We then created a course called Safety Essentials, which was a 1-day course for all of our frontline staff, really focused on the main hazards that they would face on a day-to-day basis, things like ladder safety, lifting, violence, that sort of thing. We put about 600 customer service reps through that. And then at the same time, we started to investigate every time loss incident, identified root cause, and really promoted those as kind of a one-page newspaper article, because we were really trying to create a no-blame culture where people could see that we were addressing the issues and we weren't blaming people. And I think that's always been a part of our culture right from the very beginning, is creating a culture where people can report incidents and they're not going to be blamed for it. Carrying on with our culture journey, year two, we focused on accountability. And so when it comes to safety, I think safety is really about leadership. And over the years, I have come to know that people really focus on what you do rather than what you say. And so we have developed some performance scorecards, and we do hold our frontline supervisors accountable for safety. And they're responsible for, having quality monthly inspections, quality safety meetings, and all of the hazards that are identified in their work environment. We actually track them. We call it our closure rate, to make sure that we're actually implementing controls. From there, we moved into a coaching in year three, engagement in year four, where we wanted to get employees involved in an employee recognition program. We've reduced our injury rate by about 70% in the last 7 years, which is fantastic. And I think what I've described to you is we've done a lot of work addressing physical hazards in the workplace. And going forward, you hear a lot of the stats out there, and mental health is becoming a bigger component in the workplace. And it's now the #1 cause of disability in Canada. And so we're starting to put more effort into addressing psychological hazards. And We know from the research we've been doing that there's 13 psychosocial factors relating to communication, leadership, support for people, recognition. Those things I think we can put more effort into because when a person is stressed and not feeling well, they can also be preoccupied, and that could lead to an incident as well.
One element of the culture or program they tried to instill in the organization centered on ensuring they had a handle on events, incidents, near misses, in order to assess what caused the event and how to prevent them in the future. It's a form of transparency, ensuring that everyone sees what is actually happening. And the tool they adopted to achieve that objective was what they call a no-blame policy.
Oh, it's critical to safety performance. People really need to understand that they need to be involved. And really, we're trying to build a culture where people will report near misses. So before somebody gets injured, we can go in and investigate and put controls in place. And without a no-blame culture, you're really driving your incident reporting underground, where people prefer to, look both ways. Okay, nobody saw anything, so I'm not going to report it. So it's critical to having a good safety culture.
If there's a common theme we found in preparing this television series, it's that safety is not an event, it's a process, and that the journey never really ends, at least not until there is not one preventable injury at home or at work. People like Kevin Mooney, a professional in the safety field, are quick to remind us that while his job involves a focus on safety in the workplace, it does not end there.
Safety is not 9 to 5. It really is it's a thinking process, and I think I've heard stories from our employees now where they go home and they look at things differently. It's hard to not, sit in one of our ladder safety courses and then go home and not follow, the risk awareness that you have from that course when you're setting up the Christmas lights, right? So I've heard people saying, hey, you know what, I set up the ladder safely now at home. And I think that's another avenue where our program can really grow to, is to really start getting people talking about at-home safety so that they can learn from each other. So it's an area where we can still grow.
Welcome back to our program. Joining me now in studio is Phil Germain. Phil is, in a lot of ways, Mr. Safety in Saskatchewan. He's a vice president of prevention with the Workers' Compensation Board of the province. But he's intimately involved with safety organizations, both provincially and nationally, and probably one of the leading experts in this whole topic of safety and the idea of preventable or preventable accidents happening either in the workplace or at home. Phil, thanks for joining us and
pleasure,
for sitting in today. Now, you have a national perspective. You're one of the few people in the province that would have that you see Saskatchewan in the context of the entire country. How do we stack up? I know we've seen numbers, but you're much more intimately involved in it. How does Saskatchewan stack up against the rest of the country? And are there any messages in that for those of us who are watching this program?
Well, I think the message from a workplace perspective is similar to kind of off the job. But on the job, it wasn't long ago where we had the second highest workplace injury rate in the nation. We've had that standing for many, many years. And we've obviously invested a lot of time and effort and resources. And recently, according to the most recent statistics from the Association of Workers' Compensation Boards that represent all jurisdictions across Canada, we've actually moved from second worst to fourth, which doesn't sound like a lot, but really we had to outpace a couple of other jurisdictions that are doing quite well themselves. And we've had the largest drops in total and time loss injury rates in the last 5 years than any other jurisdiction in Canada.
So it's working. And how much of it do you think can be attributed to initiatives such as Mission Zero, where we talk about just really trying to raise awareness, put a focus on this whole notion of you can prevent injuries, you can prevent accidents?
Awareness is critical. We have 4 basic pillars when it comes to the WorkSafe strategy, and awareness, targeting, education and training, and then partnerships. And awareness is a critical piece to moving the injury prevention strategy and getting the results that we've gotten. Mission Zero in particular is really the centerpiece, making people believe that reaching for zero is an attainable goal, and it's kind of like continuous improvement. And I think Vince Lombardi kind of said it best, and I won't quote him exactly, but you know, it's only by striving for perfection do you ultimately attain excellence. And that's what we're really up to, and I think we're seeing it through efforts like the Mission Zero campaign and having more and more organizations and leaders across the province believe in it, buy into it, and help us move in that direction.
All right, in the introduction, I called you Mr. Safety in Saskatchewan, and that may be a bit of an exaggeration, but
yeah.
In a way it's not, because in your role at Workers' Comp, you're a senior executive at the Workers' Compensation Board, and one of your roles is to liaise with the broader community and to form partnerships. And I wouldn't mind exploring that, talking about that. You have partnerships with a lot of organizations. Can you talk about sort of how you focus and what are you looking for in a partnership?
Yeah, we believe a couple different things. We believe it's really important to reach out to others who have different perspectives maybe than us, and or can bring other things to the table that we can't. We don't see ourselves as doing everything, and it's really through most of what gets done on the injury prevention front is through partnerships. We have many partnerships with organizations from the Chambers of Commerce to Saskatchewan Federation of Labor to the CNIB to industry-run safety associations that really do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to getting out there and programming around injury prevention.
You mentioned industry safety associations. That's probably one of those overlooked aspects of this story, that there are a lot of industry associations. They do a lot of work,
yes,
but they are siloed, really. They kind of look at various industries, and you work intimately with them, right?
Yeah, we work with industry to establish industry-based safety associations. They're run by employers and workers. They're on the boards of directors. So industry itself is really grabbing a hold of the issues and guiding these nonprofit organizations to help identify and address some of the critical issues that they see within their industries. We have 7 of them, and they run the gamut of construction, oil and gas, hospitality, healthcare. And the data that we see, over the long term is, despite being in high-risk industries like manufacturing and construction and oil and gas, the industries with safety associations are dropping their rate code faster than non-safety associations, despite the fact they're really high-risk industries.
And I guess that's the point, and why Phil Germain, Vice President of Saskatchewan Workers' Compensation Board, is involved in this, because at the end of the day, there is a monetary cost to all of this stuff. That's what the Compensation Board's there for, is to provide insurance to employers in case an employee gets injured. So when you look at it from your professional perspective, from your role as an executive at Workers' Comp, how do you see this? I mean, how does it fit your mandate within the organization?
It's really about risk control. I mean, at its purest level, as an insurance company, you want to manage the risks. You want your insurance program to be viable today and in the future. We want to provide the best benefits we can to injured workers, and we want to be able to support employers helping their workers. But at the end of the day, there's a basic mantra that I kind of follow. I mean, prevention is better than rehabilitation, and rehabilitation is better than compensation. So at the end of the day, if we can prevent the injury from happening, that's way better for the worker. It's infinitely better for the worker, but it's also better for the employer. So everybody in the system wins when we prevent the injury from occurring. But at the end of the day, if the injury occurs, how we deal with that really does matter.
Now, if Saskatchewan has had one of the worst records in the country, if I could put it that way, on workplace injuries, does that mean, by extension, compensation rates and insurance premiums are higher in this province as a consequence, makes us less competitive as a marketplace?
It can, depending on the industry. Overall, our premium rates are very competitive, but that really has a lot to do with the work that started when WorkSafe and Mission Zero back in 2002. we have seen dramatic progress, over 50% reduction in injuries. In the last 5 years, I think we've gone from over 33,000 injuries reported to just under 25,000. That's a big difference. So, and what we need to fund the injuries of today and into the future is less, despite the fact there are more people working today than there was 10 years ago, despite the fact there's dramatic increases in payroll and what people get paid. The injury rates themselves have dropped significantly enough that the average premium rate that we charge employers is dropping. But industry by industry, you can see where in some cases, you know, the premium rates could be lower in other jurisdictions, and simply because it's possible that those industries haven't quite moved forward with injury prevention like they have in maybe some other jurisdictions.
But generally a good news story that we're seeing here.
It is. There's no question. We've dropped premium rates consecutive years in a row. I think back in 2002, the average premium rate was over $2, and you know today it's $1.34. You know that's, you know, I was talking with Colin Puller from the Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association not long ago, and he looked at premium rates over the last decade or so for his industry, and they're saving hundreds of millions of dollars based on the reductions of, if all things stayed the same in terms of premium rates a decade ago, they'd be paying, industry would be paying out hundreds of millions of dollars more in premiums than they are today.
And of course there's the spin-off then, that's less demand on the health system.
Oh.
So everybody benefits from that. And really the human side of this is there are people not getting hurt.
And there is certainly the business case. There's no question there's a business case for this, but the human side, I read every fatality report that comes through WCB, and it's hard. There is undeniably, and we don't see it, I think, enough in the public, but there is a huge human cost to these injuries that we really need to make sure that we're focused on Mission Zero.
Phil, thank you very much for taking the time to join us today and provide us with a bit of insight on Mission Zero and how it fits into the broader scheme of things. So thanks very much for your time.
My pleasure.
My guest has been Phil Germain, Vice President of Prevention with Saskatchewan Workers' Compensation Board. And that concludes this episode of Zero. We'll see you next time.